Coming at you from Los Angeles, this is Mobility Revolution, powered by HireCar. We're going to take you on a journey through the unique business models and income opportunities that mobility as a service has to offer. From selling cars to sharing scooters, you'll learn how you fit in to the mobility revolution. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mobility Revolution powered by HireCar. We're your hosts, Nate Ryan
and Reese Moulton.
After moving from New York, working on Wall Street, to settling down in Los Angeles, working in portfolio management and walking to work, Joe became the very first car owner to rent out a car on the HireCar platform. Now, just 3 years later, he's the CEO that took HireCar public on the NASDAQ market. We welcome on Joe Furnari, the CEO of HireCar. Joe, welcome.
Thanks, Nate and Reese, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Stoked to have you on, man.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Joe, give us a little bit of insight into how you came into HireCar, because it's kind of an interesting story, being a customer to becoming the CEO.
Yeah, it is. And it's an interesting story. So it starts back in New York City, circa 2003. I moved out there for school, was working on Wall Street, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley after finishing school. We're originally from California, so decided to move back to Los Angeles, and I got tired of the winters back there and the hurricanes and all that crazy stuff that happens back there. And so living in Santa Monica now, walking to work. My wife kept her job in New York, so she's working from home. And now all of a sudden we have a car in the garage that's just collecting dust. My wife says, Joe, we're not using the car. We're using Uber and Lyft anyway. Just get rid of it. So I posted it to Craigslist thinking that I could sell it privately. I ended up getting somebody interested in responding to the post. It's an Uber driver, and instead of buying it, he wants to rent it from me. And I said, okay, I'm game. So we started walking down the path of getting the vehicle into the hands of the driver, but I run into the insurance issue, which is Uber, Lyft require insurance in the name of the driver at the time of the rental. So I would have had to put this random person that I've just met on Craigslist Classifieds onto my personal insurance policy.
Not necessarily the safest bet, huh?
Yeah, no, something that's a little too risky at this point. Yeah, a little too risky. But that got me thinking, maybe there's more Uber drivers out there. Maybe there's a peer-to-peer platform that I could use. Sure enough, I do a quick Google search, rent a car for Uber, and up pops HireCar. HireCar is a peer-to-peer car sharing marketplace where I can post my car to the market as a vehicle owner. Uber, Lyft drivers can come browse inventory. And most importantly, they're generating insurance in the name of the driver at the time of the rental. So I'm like, perfect. This is exactly
no brainer.
Yeah, was back
Let's do it.
Yeah.
This was back in what, 2015?
Right. So this is July of 2015 I'm doing this.
So there weren't really a lot of options back then, huh?
Well, no. I mean, I didn't find Turo, and Get Around, I don't even think had launched. So there wasn't really a peer-to-peer. My thought process was, well, maybe you have Airbnb where you can rent a house. Maybe you can rent a car. And I think at that time, Turo was branded as Relay Rides.
Right.
And so, but the first thing because the guy that had responded to the Craigslist ad was an Uber driver, I was like, okay, Google search, rent a car for Uber.
Yep.
And HireCar was showing up number one. And so I started to do a little research. They had a CNN article. They had a Wall Street Journal article. And I'm like, all right, this must be a legitimate company.
It's a real deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So post my car to the marketplace. It took a month or two to get a booking request from them. And it was great. Next day, I am handing off the keys to this driver. And it's like 6 a.m. I'm still working New York hours. And so we coordinate to meet at 6 a.m. Well, at this key exchange that I had decided to meet with the driver, Abby, who is one of the original founders of HireCar, knows about this transaction. And so he shows up. And so I hand off my keys to this first driver, and this driver's driving away with my car. And Abby comes running up to me out of the blue. I had no idea what this guy looked like, but he was wearing his pajamas. He had crazy hair because he lived down in Orange County. So he woke up at like 4 a.m. to get up to me. and just wild-eyed and said, Joe, this is great. This is our proof of concept. You're the first person to rent your car on my side. And I'm like,
man.
oh no.
Yeah. See you later.
As he said it, the car turned the corner and disappeared.
Yeah.
I'm like, that car is gone. It'll be
Yep.
chopped in Mexico tomorrow. But contrary to that initial thought process, 6 weeks in, I've made $1,000 of found income from renting the car. I'm like, all right, this is a viable business. So I added another 4 cars, got Mike in. He added 2 cars. And at that point, we were represented like 60% of the daily
Right.
active rentals with our 66 cars.
Yep. That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, prior to Hire Car, did you have any experience, like, I mean, within like the sharing economy whatsoever? Or like, did you have a feel for, I mean, like just, I guess, participating within the sharing economy?
We did a little bit, actually. So my prior job as a portfolio manager was managing real estate owned properties. These are properties that had been foreclosed by the banks and were sitting on banks' balance sheets. And actually, the first idea that we had was called Project Phantom, where it would be an Airbnb, and we'd post these broom swept homes completely empty onto this marketplace, and we would call it urban camping, basically. So these individuals would come in and they'd have to bring their sleeping bag, their toothbrush, and their own toilet paper.
Interesting.
But they have a broom swept dry, and
Yeah.
all of these homes had a keyless entry, like a lockbox on them. The idea was to go out to some of the larger banks, Chase and SunTrust, and all of these guys that had these properties at that time, and kind of utilize or unlock those houses that were just sitting there. Ran in obviously to some insurance issues where
Yeah, exactly.
those homes are insured, but they're not insured for residential stays and retail. So
Got it.
we are back to square one. All of a sudden I have this car and I can make some money off of it. All right, let's really start to ramp it up.
Yep.
So that's what we did.
So your car's been out for 6 weeks. You have $1,000 in your bank account. What led you to make that decision to pursue working with Hire Car further than just being a car owner?
Well, we were, as a vehicle owner, we were seeing just this tidal wave of demand coming from drivers who needed a car and didn't have a car that qualified and were looking for a short-term solution or a medium-term solution to their vehicle issues or vehicle deficiencies, I guess you'd say. And so I had continued to keep in touch with Abby. At that point, I was looking to do something, for myself on the side. I think that's one thing that Wall Street and just being in finance in New York taught me was you want to be working for yourself. Otherwise, you're working for somebody else. And so, we were looking for a way, Mike and I were looking for a way to kind of go out on our own. And this seemed like a perfect opportunity. So Mike and I rallied the friends and family and brought in a small money raise. And at that point, Abby was talking about doing a money raise as well. This was Q1 of 2016. Was talking about doing a small money raise already. They had, I think they had just gotten accepted into Y Combinator. And so they had a very clear choice: go with the Y Combinator route or go with private funds. And so
Yeah, I think that was actually just right after I had started.
Right. Yeah,
them.
that's right. You were employee number one. I'm technically employee number two.
Got a leg up on you somewhere.
Right.
I remember that, us making that drive up to the Bay to especially meet Mike for the first time, and then meeting you up there as well.
That's right. So that was part of kind of rallying the friends and family around us and getting that collective opinion of, was this a good decision to make? Because I'm walking away from a portfolio management job where I'm managing $5 billion in mortgage loans for a public company commercial bank, was like, do I want to quit that cushy job and jump headfirst into a tech startup with no funding on the balance sheet, no funds on the balance sheet. So part of that was going up to Monterey where Mike was, introducing him to the team, and once we got buyout from Mike and Mike's father-in-law, who was an early investor in this company as well. It was a no-brainer. So this was May 1st of 2016. We decided to cut ties with the cushy banking job and jump headfirst into this.
Awesome. What was the general response that you got from doing that friends and family round? When you were pitching the idea to the people that you grew up with or the people that you knew closely? Was it hard for them to kind of grasp and understand the idea of to understand the vision that you saw within the company?
Yes. I mean, is car sharing for ride sharing concept is
it's like another
what's
language.
Car sharing, what's ride sharing, right? But then you explain, well, it's the Airbnb on wheels, and then they kind of understand it. But
the
then
light turns on a little bit,
yeah. And then you start to get into, well, what's your experience? Have you done this before? And just no, I've never done this before. But I think it's got some legs. This is $1 billion company, so I put together a deck and it looked pretty good. The other key there was getting the real legal documents. So instead of going to some of these chop shops to get legal documents done to raise money, going to a legitimate lawyer that really understood kind of the startup culture and the mechanism for raising private funds was key. And so that's when I met, I was introduced to Nimish Patel, who was MSK's, he's a partner at MSK. And Nimish really understood it. And so after I'd sold Nimish on it, then he went in and did the brand damage to create a real document, a real fund, a legitimate document. And then once you have that legitimate document to go out and start selling to people, that makes it so much easier, rather than just a napkin IOU to raise $500,000. It's a Series C preferred note that you're receiving. And the idea with the Series C preferred note was, we didn't really know what the value of the company was today, but when you do a follow-on round, theoretically you're doing it with an angel investor or a venture capital fund that could value the company legitimately. And then the Series C note converts at that price. So it was having that type of structure, I think, gave a lot of people comfort, a lot of early investors comfort. And those investors have done very well. I think they've 10x on their money at this point, even more.
Yeah.
But yes, it was, I guess, to answer that question a different way, yes, it was tough. It's harder to raise $500,000 than it is to raise 10 million, 20 million. Just having, if you've already done it and you have shown execution, it's a lot easier in those later rounds.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Beyond the initial challenges of getting the initial round of funding, Reese and I know from firsthand some of the challenges we've had to overcome, from working on multiple spreadsheets and trying to just, bring the company up that way. What are some of the biggest challenges that you saw as a CEO of taking this company from really, at the time that you founded, a concept to a public company?
Well, keeping focus, I think that's the key. I mean, especially in industries where you have technical operators that understand, that are on the cutting edge of industry. You see $1 billion idea every week. And so the idea is focus on one. And then once you focus and you have this siloed or very specific roles for people really early on to play, and you trust those people to play that. I mean, a good example, Mike coming in as the number one, he was the first sales agent. And he came in that first month, we grew 93% month over month in revenue, just by implementing the one-man sales team. And it's like, if you trust your people to be experts in those fields, and there isn't a lot of cross-pollination between those roles, I think that was probably one of our bigger successes, and why we were able to grow and scale and build leverage into the platform so quickly, because I didn't go into Abby and say, Abby, teach me how to build a platform. Like, I trusted Abby to build a platform. I didn't go to Mike and say, teach me how to do sales. I want to help with sales. Mike built his sales team and he grew it up. And then the key there is, just as a CEO or as the leader of the company at that point, having the vision to keep everybody moving in the same direction and rowing in the same direction. That was one of the keys.
What do you think one of the main key factors at this point? We've seen HireCar just continually grow month after month, year over year. But what do you think are one of the main differentiators of HireCar to the other car sharing platforms that are out there now?
Well, the key here is the insurance piece right now. Just generally apps that we see that are kind of being sold to dealerships, they typically don't come with built-in customer demand and a built-in support function below them, underneath it or underpinning it. And so that is a key differentiator for us right now. The fact that we're a public company, the fact that we have 100 people in downtown LA with a dedicated call center and a sales team that is highly, highly trained now to drive leads into dealerships. I think that's unique. I haven't seen that before. And it's one of the reasons why we're growing so fast right now with the dealership initiative, is because we're offering something new and unique, and it's a different type of model than what I've seen around there in the past.
Right.
Can you get into the dealership initiative a little bit? I know we have a lot of really cool products coming out. One recently just launched the new owner portal for HireCar, which is a huge lift for the company, because it's been a little bit since we've actually made some significant changes to that side of the business. How do you see this new dealer initiative pushing the company forward?
Right. So it was interesting when we first started, the platform was peer-to-peer. Mm-hmm. And so it was one individual, one car renting to another individual. What we quickly discovered is having what we call an institutional supply is a lot more reliable for customer-based revenues and as a company as a whole. Mm-hmm. And so as we started to make this pivot towards the dealer space, we were seeing early adopters from the dealer space, from rental car companies that were coming in and renting cars. And they really showed us the way, essentially, right?
And they also saw a huge benefit from it as well. So you knew it was easy fit right there.
Exactly, right. And so in 2018, we really made that pivot towards the dealer space. And that's just continuing to grow tremendously, because these dealers are all being told over the next 10 years, you can buy a dealership today, but in the next 10 years, you got to get your money out of it, because your business model is going to hit a wall with autonomy. So we've morphed now with this dealer portal into becoming the premier application for these dealers to rent excess inventory. And that's just one use case, right? It's an alternative revenue stream, number one, but then there's also the CPO, the path to ownership, earn to own, a bunch of the programs that we're rolling out to these dealerships that are that Brian probably detailed earlier. So I'm excited about that. I see that as being the future. And then that's over the next 2-3 years, that this is the strategy, laser focused here for the next 2-3 years. But the concept of moving to into international and nearshore down in Mexico and to Canada, our model works really well, because the bulk of cars that are rented outside of the United States are by individual owners with 10 to 20 cars. And so our model, uniting that model on one platform, I think would work tremendously well. Yep. So that's a 3-4 year plan. It might accelerate, but we'll see. and the dealership space building out as well from the application. Like the dealer portal that was rolled out as just phase one. You have phase two, phase three coming down the pike in the next 3 or 4 months. That's really going to, I see that completely transforming the dealer experience. Right now, we have the dealer experience where we have one account rep, but with a white glove type of service and a subscription-based model where we're helping the dealers sell cars with a white glove type service that we're planning on providing over the next 3 or 4 months. I see that as the future. So I'm really excited about that.
To kind of touch on that, I mean, how would you say that HireCar is kind of shaping the future of transportation and empowering people within like the mobility as a service industry?
Right. So we are, it's interesting because we're a dual-sided marketplace. You have owners and drivers. And so from an owner perspective, their owners are very clearly moving towards the dealership space and both franchised and independents. But you also have this concept of an individual who's renting the car, and we call them drivers or customers. We are enabling them to rent a car, to have a job, and ultimately kind of it creates a bridge to a better life or upward mobility. And that's exactly what this company was originally kind of founded on. We talked to Abby about, what his idea was. They were looking to open up the market of which was a black box before. And they created a platform to enable the transactions between owners and drivers. And so the original thesis there has changed to a little bit loftier of a goal, which is enabling drivers to bridge those social kind of gaps and climb the ladder.
Right.
I mean, there's definitely been some amazing success stories with the company, especially, for me. I remember the first time hearing it, but we've heard it countless times since then, is HireCar's actually essentially given people a home.
Yep.
Like hearing these stories of all the drivers that have been homeless and then use HireCar as essentially the only option for them to make money and make revenue and then help afford, one, put a roof over their head, and then use services like Uber and Lyft and Postmates and all these other delivery and rideshare companies as essentially the side income to pursue their opportunities and their dreams. Which, especially being on the marketing side, is like the greatest thing you could ever hear.
Yeah, it's awesome
for us because it's so touching.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the first driver that rented my car was, he wasn't homeless, but I mean, he was definitely down and out. But he drove that car 50,000 miles a year. And made a ton of money driving for Uber. And, now he's in Atlanta. He's a producer. He has 2 or 3 cars on the site at this point.
So awesome.
Yeah. So he's really, those types of success stories are what keeps us going here.
Yep. Exactly. I mean, HireCar, it seems to becoming more of like a leader and rapidly growing within the mobility as a service industry. Where do you see the company best fitted within that space over the next 5 years?
Yeah, so you have this 2 or 3 year vision of enabling dealers to play in mobility as a service. But then you have this 5 to 10 year vision where you start to see autonomy coming into play. Level 5 autonomy, where cars are being produced or rolling off the assembly lines without a steering wheel.
Yep.
And in that world, I think we fit perfectly because through some of these OEM partnerships that we're dealing with right now, or that we have in place right now, we're running pilots to unite their dealer base. But in the future, I see in the very, very close future, or the very near future, I see an OEM potentially stepping up to white label HireCar's platform to become the mobility solution for all dealers. And it's not only car sharing for ride sharing, it's just simple ride sharing for leisure, subscription-based models, free floating models, keyless entry. All of that stuff is very easy for us to roll out. And so with the dealership initiative or with the OEM initiative pilots, I'm really excited about that piece of it because I see that being the future. In the future, you're going to have multiple autonomous car fleets. It's not only going to be Uber and Lyft. You're going to see GM. You're going to see Ford. You're going to see Apple. You're going to see Waymo,
Tesla.
The Tesla. Yeah, Tesla. I think if they survive, I don't know if they can even survive. But you have all of these autonomous fleets. So as a consumer, you are going to have the ability to call a Ford autonomous vehicle to your doorstep or a GM autonomous vehicle. And who wins in that scenario? Like who are of that competitive landscape? Who do we think wins? Well, I think the people who win are the low cost manufacturers of fleet, as well as the low cost maintainers of fleet, and the dealerships with a simple pivot in their current business model have the infrastructure in place to be the low cost maintainer of fleet. Manufacturers have the ability to be the low cost producers of fleet. And so a firm like these large domestic manufacturers here in the United States are perfectly positioned if they start moving deliberately in the space.
Yep.
And we're starting to see that. As Jim Hackett from Ford is saying, he doesn't want to be known as a manufacturing company anymore. He wants to be known as a mobility company.
Right.
And I think Toyota is starting to make that shift too. I mean, I think they just publicly announced that they're no longer an auto company or a car company. They're a mobility company, and they're moving people, not cars.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming more of a buzzword nowadays. Yeah, mobility.
The cards are all out on the table. You got two billionaires battling it out right now with Warren Buffett and Berkshire. They're buying dealerships. You got Carl Icahn, who's out there buying stakes in Lyft and Ford and Pep Boys and Amco. What he's doing is creating the infrastructure to be able to handle an autonomous vehicle. Everybody talks about self-driving cars. Nobody talks about self-maintaining, self-cleaning cars. Right? And that's
true.
Eventually the infrastructure will be built up for that. But that's 40, 50, 60 years out.
Right.
So the autonomous technology is going to be here really early, and then the infrastructure will be built up behind it. But what that means is that you have this opportunity over the next 30, 40 years to be a low-cost maintainer, low-cost manufacturer of fleet out there. I say that's a pretty powerful proposition for one of these larger domestic manufacturers to be the leader in the space. And Hire Car is uniting their dealer base. Yep. Right, to be able to do that.
How do you see? I know there's a lot of talk in this space, especially when it comes to autonomy, self-driving, how it's going to shift dealers and OEMs and the auto industry in general. How do you see this affecting the way people are consuming vehicles, and especially with Hire Car getting into the mobility space? We're definitely, without a doubt, going to have to adapt to autonomy and things like that. How do you see the interaction between a Hire Car, the dealers, and drivers in the kind of this race towards autonomy?
Well, so I mean, certainly uniting the dealer base is the main focus, right? Because you talk to who've sat at the boardroom level at some of these domestic manufacturers, and you hear it from them. They're like, well, these dealers are ripping off our customers and eroding our brand equity. And then you talk to the dealers, and the dealers are like, well, these manufacturers are squeezing my margins, making it impossible for me to do business.
Oh, interesting.
And so there's a natural friction there that Hire Car is perfectly situated to be the medium between those two platforms. And as long as we can prove out the business, which is what we've already started to do with a lot of these dealership partnerships, I see us having a very fruitful relationship in the future with OEMs.
Anyways, Joe, thanks for coming on today. It's been a pleasure. And Join us next week for episode 3 of Mobility Revolution powered by HireCar. We have a couple special guests, Rudy Salo and Jeff Hudges.
See you next time, guys. Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you, guys.